Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on NeffordsRadio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 13th, 2017, I think, right? It's the date, isn't it? I hope so. That's what the computer tells me, and I believe anything the computer tells me. What's happening this morning? As it turns out, trying to catch up on some of the news. Trump is on his way to Paris, where I'm sure they love the hell out of the guy. Should be another fantastic trip abroad for the president. 2 disasters so far. I don't know what prompted this new one, but it has been pointed out this morning, of course, that he is headed there for Bastille Day, which is tomorrow. And I did see reported yesterday that I guess he was considering not taking this trip, and then he heard that there was a military parade involved. I don't know really why that would have motivated. I know he loves the military parade idea, wanted to have one for his own inauguration. Why he would want to watch a French one, I'm not entirely sure, but that was the rumor anyway. Ned Resnikoff pointing out this morning that Trump's Paris trip coincides with the day celebrating the overthrow of a gaudy, gilded, despotic rule by a family of pampered incompetents. So that ought to be an interesting anniversary to mark. By the way, we would change the construction of that one. They were gaudy, gilded despots who were also pampered incompetents. It makes it sound like a bunch of pampered incompetents overthrew a group of gaudy, gilded, despotic rulers, but hey, that's Twitter for you. I can excuse that. Anyway, you all get the idea. Let's see what else is going on today. Greg Dworkin will be in early this morning to round up the headlines from his perspective. We'll see what's out there. Progress of sorts being made, can kick forward on the Republican healthcare repeal bill. I guess latest word is that for whatever reason they'll be putting forward a version of the bill on the floor that includes the Ted Cruz provisions. I'm not certain yet whether that means that they think it will pass muster with the parliamentarian, or they think it won't, and that's why they're including it, and they're looking to tank the whole thing, or just embarrass Ted Cruz on the floor. I don't know what the play is. I don't know where Ted Cruz stands in the estimation of Mitch McConnell and vice versa. We'll have to find out. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. No word, and we won't likely get any word from the parliamentarian until the action is taking place on the floor. That's just not the way they tend to work. Okay, let's see. What else is new today? I have a hard time separating what we had read on the air yesterday versus what happened in between shows between then and now. So I guess you'll forgive me if we tread over some of the same ground, but in all likelihood, everyone is reading this stuff as quickly as it comes out anyway. So it's entirely possible that you may have read ahead, and that's a good thing. You should be curious about these things. Greg Dworkin, already ringing in. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. There's just so much going on. I thought maybe I'd help you sort out what happened.
Yeah, there's no point in my trying to do it.
Well, I don't remember either, but, let's just pretend we're starting fresh.
Trump is on the cover of Time magazine.
Trump Jr.
Yes, right. There's 2 of them, Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's the Trump Jr. Picture with, it says, caught red-handed or just red-handed or something like that.
Yeah, red, haha. And then,
yeah. So do you want to do Russia or do you want to do healthcare first? They're both important.
Let's do the healthcare.
Let's do healthcare. All right. I put that in a separate folder, but
right,
I do have a bunch of articles that I did send for you, and they're actually on the list. They're kind of semi-organized.
Well, that's nice.
That is to say, I got a healthcare bunch and then I got a Russia bunch.
Excellent.
In the list.
I see.
So let me start with a generic from Rick Wilson from a couple days ago in Daily Beast called Mitch McConnell's Summer of Discontent.
Summer of Discontent. Okay.
Yeah. Rick starts out by pointing out the Senate healthcare bill is about as popular with the American public as child predators, herpes, and Nickleback.
Poor Nickleback.
Yeah, poor Nickleback. But you know what? Everybody hates Nickleback, so he's
I don't know how that happened.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's earnest signaling this week that he's having trouble landing the GOP holdout for repeal of Obamacare should send up real alarm signals inside the party. It isn't simply that McConnell, the most gifted legislative player since LBJ, hasn't been able to wrangle the votes. It's that he knows how deeply unpopular this repeal has become with the American people.
Okay. I don't know why he goes in for that, but okay.
He's a Republican, or he was. Another thing lost in the noise and static of the Obamacare fight in the G20 summit affected Republican senators more than they're discussing publicly. In order to pressure Republican Senator Dean Heller for daring to put his political survival above Trump's desire to put a win on Obamacare, any kind of win, on the scoreboard, Trump's pet super PAC promised $1 million plus negative ad campaign against the Nevada senator. This is an unforgivable political transgression. Despite being a man who's rarely shown an iota of loyalty to anyone, wives, business partners, vendors, contractors, and campaign staff, Trump has still received practically unquestioning obedience from members of the House and Senate, no matter his apostasies to conservatism, no matter the political damage following his lead would almost inevitably occur. The Lemming Caucus still has more members than either common sense or political survival instincts would indicate. The line that was crossed with Heller wasn't just the usual partisan scrapping. It's a sign to even the slowest senators, I guess he's talking about Inhofe, that Trump not only can, but almost inevitably will betray them. Like when we were talking about this yesterday, like when the House passed the lousy healthcare bill and Trump said it was mean after they did it.
Yes.
Throwing them all under the bus.
Right.
Trump hurt McConnell's ability to move his caucus forward on repeal. His manic tweeting since then hasn't helped. Trump's disinterest in the actual legislative process is clear. He lacks the intellectual and policy chops to deal with anything more complex than 140-character Tourettic bursts. He's talking about the Tourette syndrome there. Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan actually know their business. When it comes to running the Senate and House, if only they had a competent partner at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, you and I both agree McConnell's overrated as a strategic genius. He doesn't know tactics. And Paul Ryan is way overrated as a policy wonk because he doesn't know crap. He's not even sure how insurance works. But, Rick has to throw those bones to his party because otherwise nobody will read them.
I guess, but...
Now, Jonathan Chait, Republicans still can't design a workable health care plan. This one comes from a New York magazine. Even if the exchanges were collapsing into a death spiral, which, by the way, they're not, it would not justify the plans to slash Medicaid, a program that does not require actuarial balance and is not even theoretically susceptible to a death spiral. And in any case, a mounting body of evidence has found that the exchanges are stable. Financial and analysts have said this. Insurance actuaries have said this. Even the federal government has said it because an HHS report from their own people said it. Recently, another piece of evidence has underscored the conclusion in even more detail. Cynthia Cox and Larry Levitt, they're over at Kaiser, have a detailed report on the state of the markets. They conclude insurers on the whole have found a stable price point. The medical loss ratio, which means a share of premium payments paid out in claims, dropped in the beginning of the year, and insurance profit margins shot up. Facing a brand new market, insurers initially set their premiums too low and much lower than the CBO. It has taken a few years, but they've corrected the error and settled in at a stable level. Republicans have cherry-picked horror stories. Shocking. I have my shocked face on. Republicans have cherry-picked horror stories of skyrocketing premiums. And it's true that 2017 saw premiums rise as part of the price correction, but there's zero reason to expect premiums to need to rise more.
Okay.
Except, of course, for the fact that the government is run by people who are trying to kill Obamacare.
Important.
Okay. So there's that. Here's one from Ed Kilgore. Mitch McConnell running out of time, money, and luck in effort to pass Trump care. And basically says the problem is McConnell's run through his extra money and he doesn't have enough to really buy people off. And let me give you a quick tweet storm. It's not that bad. From Andy Slavitt.
Okay.
Who used to run Medicare, Medicaid, and the ACA for President Obama. And he says, I'm going to relay an experience with a Republican senator from when I was in the Obama administration. I haven't relayed this before.
Brand new.
This was yesterday. This senator, a Republican, was running for re-election in 2016 in a state that was fairly Democratic.
Okay.
Said senator grilled me at a hearing. Suddenly, the senator gave a speech about opioid epidemic.
All right.
After the hearing, the senator asked me to join them in the most remote part of the state to do a workshop on opioids.
Okay.
Staff told me the senator couldn't care less about drug abusers and gave me ample evidence, which suggested that I not participate because it was a stunt.
Oh.
I sent somebody out to do the event, and the senator was happy.
All right.
I wanted to be bipartisan, and this senator won.
Oh. Damn it.
You could probably guess that the senator is now a leading force in wanting to cut Medicaid.
Okay. Yes.
I don't know if it's Portman, but it's somebody. I have had several people have convos with them about the massive impact in their state of a 35% Medicaid on people in recovery. Turns out my staff is right about the senator. I love public service, maybe because I didn't do it until I was 47, and I felt so lucky. I couldn't believe my good fortune, and I refused to play politics if lives were at stake. I didn't care who helped get elected. Well, shame on me. Guess I should have done what I could to get a good person elected, because this senator is willing to take treatment from people, but at least I didn't meet with the Russian government.
All right. Sure. One last shot at the end.
Right? But he's right about that.
Yeah. Well, they're jerks.
Greg Sargent, this dirty little secret is the real reason why repeal is so hard for Republicans. And I actually block quoted some of that in our list so you could find it easy.
Let's see.
The Affordable Care Act has widely been held aloft as one of the leading drivers of the deepening polarization of American political life. It's been bitterly fought over for years and has loomed as a great embodiment of all that ideologically divides the two parties. But in a strange twist, the GOP debate over repeal has actually revealed there's a surprising amount of hidden consensus in healthcare. We know that because they're having trouble getting rid of it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, the fact is, we're right, they're wrong, and they just can't admit it because that would mean we win and they lose, and they hate that. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay.
If it weren't for that, they wouldn't be trying to get rid of it.
That may be true.
In a nutshell, I mean, it's true. I mean, there's no reason to try to get rid of it and repeal it other than they said they would and they hate losing.
Right. I mean, they give reasons, they're just not true.
No, they're not even close to true, and they don't even believe in themselves, as we talked about when we did the anti-slavery thing. In a nutshell, what the debate has really shown is the passage and implementation of the ACA, that would be also known as Obamacare,
yes,
has given rise to a latent majority in Congress, or at least one in the Senate. And that's fair, because it's really more the Senate than the House. House people are crazy. That has more or less made peace with the ACA spending and regulatory architecture and its fundamental ideological goals. Either for political or principled reasons or for some combination of the two, the debate has forced this basic reality out into the open, and this, I think, is one key reason it's proving so hard for the GOP to repeal it. And then he goes on to talk about how Dave Weigel had this town hall meeting with Jerry Moran, and he's having trouble supporting the bill, and at the town hall meeting, he said he didn't describe the task facing Republicans as repeal. It was repair, replace whatever language people are using. Pressed by activists and voters, Moran said he didn't want to cut back Medicaid. I have concern about people with disabilities, the frail, the elderly. I also know that if we want health care in rural places and across Kansas, Medicare and Medicaid need to compensate for the services they provide.
Yes.
So when he goes and he talks to his constituents, however he winds up voting on this, and we'll have to see.
Yes.
He's totally honest about what's going on here. If I'm going to represent Kansas, I'm for Medicaid. Now I'm going to go back to Washington, and they're going to tell me to vote against Medicaid, and this makes me uncomfortable. What he does is another story altogether. But
votes against Medicare and Medicaid.
The idea of moderates always fold, not even that Moran is a moderate, he's not. But the idea that moderates always fold has this as the underlying core as to why that's wrong for this. This bill is going to go down. It's going to fail. The moderates aren't going to fold. And all the people who just claim they always do are wrong.
Well, I hope so. I mean, how else to put it? It's sometimes hard to believe.
It'll come back in some other form. But we're talking about this bill this time right now.
Well, good. Let's get to it then.
From hospitals, doctors, and patients, a last gasp of opposition to the Senate health care bill. This is in the Washington Post today, in the Power Post.
Power Post?
Yeah.
I don't even get that.
Yeah, it's not even in the 202. It's in the Power Post.
Damn.
But I liked it because something I was involved with, at least peripherally, in helping to spread the word. But the Tweediatricians, that is to say pediatricians on Twitter,
That's good.
have been all posting, making little videos of pediatrics people saying, don't vote for this bill. This is awful. And they acknowledge that in this article here with a one-liner. Pediatricians have starred in videos. Patients' associations have flown in hundreds of Americans with chronic illnesses to meet with lawmakers and their aides. These events, in turn, have generated tremendous public pressure on the senators who will decide over the next week whether their health care bill will succeed or fail. The measure remained in trouble this week, with conservatives angling for a more dramatic repeal of the ACA and centrists saying the bill jeopardized coverage for too many Americans. Thank you. They're not moderates. They're centrists. And they're not even that. President Trump even weighed publicly Wednesday, telling senators he would be very angry if they do not pass a bill. Good. Get ready to be angry. Okay. It'll take your mind off of the fact that your son is going up the river. It does make a big impact, Shelley Moore Capito, Republican of West Virginia, said of the Abbey across the country, because it's been in her office. She well knows. John Hoeven of North Dakota said in a statement he's met with healthcare leaders and particularly officials with rural hospitals. Hoeven said over the July 4th recess he opposes the bill in its current form. So you have all of these people who are kind of committed in public. Margot Sanger-Katz, in the upshot today, says Congress is facing a time crunch to repeal Obamacare and talks about how the process could drag on past July, but there's tremendous pressure for Congress to act quickly because they've got tax reform. Of course, Congress likes its summer vacation. September's going to be busy. Fiscal New Year's Eve is coming. And time isn't going to help lawmakers reach a consensus. So the idea that you just drag it out and keep coming back all, the next 6 years the way they used to do with the repeal Obamacare thing, it's a completely different animal. Now, Politico has one this morning. Senate moderates sidelined a new Obamacare repeal bill. Centrist Republicans are still opposed to deep Medicaid cuts, potentially dooming the GOP effort to get out the health law. They're concentrating on Murkowski, who's still a no, despite the fact that more money has been sent to Alaska by a different mechanism.
Okay.
McConnell needs 50 votes simply to open debate, and he's well short of that number. Now, is that debate thing a Pence thing? Does Pence come in and break a tie if there's a motion to proceed?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't see why he would exclude.
I must never see that, so I thought I'd ask.
It's just procedure, but a vote is a vote.
Yeah, okay. So he needs 50 votes to open debate. Not right now, said John Cornyn. Well, we don't need the votes right now. We need them next week. Right. Said John Cornyn, who doesn't have them.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. I mean, people flip, and they flip quick. It is a play. I mean, it does happen. You say no, and then they hold the vote. You say yes, and then you run away.
Right. No breakthroughs. There's been a lot of discussions. We remain in the same camp, said Dean Heller. This is this morning or yesterday. So it doesn't really seem like people are moving. And then finally, this last piece from Axios, draft GOP healthcare bill will include the Cruz provision, as you were talking about.
Yeah.
Also known as the consumer freedom option, which is also known as freedom to die.
Plus USA number one.
It doesn't cover drugs. It doesn't cover hospitalization. It doesn't cover pregnancy. I'm not really sure what it covers.
They're free to not cover anything.
You know what it is? It's a way to bring back junk insurance.
Yes.
You pay $3 a year, and you don't get covered, and you're happy because you're not paying a big premium, and you don't really know what you don't have until you get sick and then find out that absolutely positively nothing is covered.
Yeah.
Oh, the emergency room over in, Children's Hospital, Pennsylvania is covered. So CHOP is covered for your kids, which is great. Problem is you happen to live in Bakersfield, California, so too bad for you.
Right. Not just because you live in Bakersfield.
Well, you just can't get it covered because you gotta go.
I mean, it's about the coverage.
There aren't any providers in your area who takes this junk insurance. Why this matters? Critics say it would undermine consumer protections like the ACA's essential health benefits and ban on charging sick people higher premiums. And most people care more for the latter than the former because they don't really understand the former. That's because healthy people will likely choose non-compliant plans. Sick people will keep plans with more protections, fragmenting the market, raising premiums for those with pre-existing conditions, which is half the country. Supporters of the idea say sick people will be insulated from higher premiums by subsidies. There's never enough money for that. That's why the high-risk pools always fail. What we're watching, the majority of industry and consumer groups that come out against the provision, as have many moderate Republicans, they mean centrists because there aren't any moderates, the provision may not survive the intense criticism it's about to get. Thank you, Ted Cruz. Really? Wanted your thing? You got your thing. Now what? It also may not comply with Senate budget rules, meaning the parliamentarian gets the rule on it, but are not going to do that until it's in writing, and today's the day it's supposed to come out with in writing, and that's why we are concentrating on healthcare right now first.
Yes.
Which will be determined sometime before the bill goes to the floor, which is supposed to be next week. And the real question on the table is exactly several questions. So the bill comes out today, exactly what's in it. What parts of it does the parliamentarian say are part of the bird bath, and you have to lose this and you can't do that? Mm-hmm. That includes any provisions in it about abortion.
Right.
Because that's policy. That's not federal government stuff. Things that might have to do with whether or not states have waivers, because that's state, not federal budget. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that the parliamentarian may have to look over.
Yes.
Then, next week for a vote. But if you don't have the votes, are you bringing it to a vote and getting it done and saying, okay, we're done even though we lost? Or are you going to put it off again? Mm-hmm. So those are the big questions on the table.
Yes. So text gets released today. All the Republican senators meet on it today.
They don't have a chance to say, I don't like it in this form.
Right. Although I guess you could just say it. But
you know what the sad thing is?
There are many. Which one?
I think the saddest of all is that if they include the Cruz provision in the bill, then he doesn't get to do it as an amendment. And if he doesn't get to do it as an amendment, nobody has a chance to not give him a sufficient second.
That's true. Right.
That's why they did it this way.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose that's a possibility. Or, I'm wondering, as you were recounting the old line about, well, nobody has a chance to say I oppose the bill as written. Now they do. I oppose the bill as written with Cruz in it, and then we'll take it out or make a point of order against it if the parliamentarian rules it as ineligible under reconciliation, and then everyone will vote to get rid of it. He may make a motion to waive the point of order, which would require 60 votes in most cases. I think in this one it certainly would, and lose it. But they may have an opportunity to both vote against Cruz and the amendment that bears his name, and change the bill as written so that their excuse of opposing the bill as currently written works when they switch their votes later.
So let me ask you a stupid question, which you will know the answer and I don't.
I don't. Okay.
Does the maneuvering on removing the Cruz provision that you just described happen before or after a motion to proceed?
After, well, the one I just described happens after a motion to proceed.
So if you don't get the motion to proceed, none of that gets to happen.
Right. That's true. And it may be that there will be people who will say, well, I won't vote for a motion to proceed on a bill that has the Cruz provision in it.
I'm saying this because my non-parliamentarian layman's look at all of this is the motion to proceed is the key vote here.
Yes.
If the motion to proceed passes, then somehow or other this thing is passing.
Yeah, that may be the case.
And the way to stop it is to stop the motion to proceed.
That's certainly the first line of defense. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible that they may say, I am willing to go forward with debate to see if we can't.
But then you're on record as voting for and against this thing.
Yes, but yeah, we go through this all the time.
Which everybody hates.
If you're against
the white
the
hat
bill,
passion.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, and most people are against the bill. If you're against the bill and you're facing your senator and they've voted yes on the motion to proceed, you say, how could you vote for this thing? They say, it's just a procedural vote, just whether or not we're going to have a debate on it. And then I plan to debate by taking the I'm a no side. And people make that distinction all the time. And if you need an excuse, then you say it's just procedural. Otherwise.
But that's only like for 2 or 3 days, and then you're actually voting on the bill. And we're talking about what happens, from that point onward. I don't think they can run from this, is what I'm saying.
Oh, well.
Nobody's going to buy that for a bill.
Not always effective.
In the spotlight. That works for bills where nobody's really paying attention. Politically.
Yes. Yeah. Essentially, that's the point at which it rarely works, or most. How will we even phrase this? In which you will most frequently get yourself in trouble, despite the excuse, is when everybody's focused on the bill. Yes,
right, and everybody is. So to me, this motion to proceed is the thing. You either win or lose.
No doubt about that. You can kill it right then and right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that I've seen senators do the same thing. Or do the opposite thing, as necessary. Sometimes just saying, well, that was just procedural vote. And then when you say, well, why don't you vote yes when you need them to vote yes on the procedural vote and then vote no on the substantive part, they say, oh no, everyone in the Senate knows procedure is substance. When they need to be there for the party on the procedural vote, they make one excuse, and when they are opposed, they make a different one.
Right. So out of order on the list, but at the very bottom, I'm just sending this one over from Politico, which I just saw, which says bipartisan fixes won't come easily if the GOP's repeal effort collapses. Pivoting to a bipartisan fix won't be quick or easy because many in the GOP privately say they might need a break between 7 years of repeal attempts and a sudden repair effort. So apparently they're having some mental health issues here in the Senate.
They're covered.
Yeah. I need a mental health day off because I can't deal with actually fixing it after I promised you I was going to get rid of it.
Yeah. Huh.
And besides, Trump is yelling at me.
And he's not.
And some Democrats are already, hey, by the way, this whole thing is happening when he's out of the country.
True.
Now is a good time to kill it.
Right. He won't be there to yell at you.
Yeah. And some Democrats are already calling for single-payer health care, an automatic non-starter for Republicans. The sharp political divide underscores just how hard it would be for the parties to come together amid the ashes of a failed repeal. It's not hard at all. Stop calling for single-payer and fix the ACA, and then call for single-payer later. This is not hard.
Oh, that's a good procedural move, too. In a manner of speaking, right? Oh, yeah. No. I won't be calling for single payer. I'll pass this repair thing. And, yes. And they'll pass it with me because I stopped calling for single payer, which made them mad. And then once it's on the books, you say, you know what? I really like single payer.
And I'll make you mad. And then so people who are supporting single payer, look, I'm advocating for it. And for people who say, but I like the ACA the way it is. Well, I voted for that too.
Yes. Well, you should have been advocating for single payer before. Well, I'm up to it now. Or you could just say, I meant to all along. I only did this to fool Republicans.
I think this is the best way to get to single payer. You pass the ACA and fix it, and then you move to single payer. So leave me alone. Okay. I mean, I don't think that's hard at all.
Okay.
You can make it difficult by insisting that it's single payer or nothing.
Yes.
Okay. And let us go back to California. Remember the David Dayen piece we did?
Yes.
Well, how about, let's see if I can find it here.
By the way,
we had one about how things are really, really getting nasty. There it is. The coalition pushing for single payer in California is fracturing. This is from July 12th, another Intercept article by Dave Dayen, D-Day. And I will put that at the bottom there so you can find it. And we talked about the fact that passing single payer in California is difficult because you have to get around Prop 98, which essentially sequesters a lot of the money to go pay for schools, and you got to put even more in because a certain percentage has to go for schools. So unless you do something about Prop 98 and the whole structure of how things get done in California, it's very difficult to do. And that's what his last piece was. This one is the coalition pushing for single payer in California is fracturing. According to interviews with more than half a dozen leading activists within the coalition, a collection of scores of progressive groups, big and small, some key members have grown frustrated by the California Nurses Association's lack of consultation about its aggressive tactics and strategy, and its refusal to disclose amendments that could improve the legislation.
Its refusal to, okay.
Amendments that are repeatedly referenced in the press but remain hidden in both public and other coalition members. In other words, what are you going to do about Prop 98? Yeah. One labor group, the National Union of Healthcare Workers, is in active discussions with its executive board to withdraw from Health of California Steering Committee. At least two additional steering committee members, the California Federation of Teachers and Unite Here, may also be on the outs, according to sources familiar with the planning. And others are stepping outside the coalition to engage with one another and devise how to move forward separately.
Yes.
In an interview, Rosselli, who has worked with CNA since the 80s, stressed the positives of CNA leadership, such as organizing more people to the cause of health care for all, but he expressed disappointment with what he called CNA's unwillingness to collaborate. They established a steering committee. The price was $25,000. It was framed to me and the executive board that we would meet to make strategic decisions, but it's not real. We appreciate the criticism, said CNA, but we're not changing tactics until the legislature adjourns. Here's where it gets interesting. Elizabeth Scholes is a senior official with California Church Impact, the 1.5 million member policy arm of the California Councils of Churches, which is currently part of the coalition and has been advocating for single payer for decades. Yes. CNA could do the work needed to craft a decent bill with a good proposal for funding, but have chosen the path of faux outrage and destruction instead. We were betrayed, and people desperate for health care were abandoned, said Scholes, who was known around the Capitol as the church lady. The single-payer movement is merely being used as a weapon in intra-party politics, calling the CNA strategy a political hit against Dems whom the CNA wishes to replace with Bernie Sanders supporters. It's getting very nasty in California. You remember the whole fight about who was going to run the Democratic Party in California. It's an unusual fight because all the participants support single-payer, not just rhetorically, but through the commitment of financial resources and with decades of effort given over to the cause. And though labor groups in particular, relatively close to the state party, some of the coalition members doing the complaining were part of the effort to successfully toss a corporate Democrat out of office last year in a primary fight. Moreover, all involved want to continue to work together. But activists interviewed by The Intercept worry that given the enormous sums of cash the health industry will eventually bring to bear, if the movement comes within striking distance, any grassroots movement can ill afford to alienate coalition partners, and no single group can do it alone. CNA declined to comment. And then they go on about some of the specific problems they're having with getting everybody on the same page. Then he ends with, frustrated coalition members maintain CNA has earned a place at a major part of the single-payer movement. They just want to see a more equal partnership. We need the CNA, but they can't drive the bus. It has to be a collective thing. So you have people who are trying to focus on getting single-payer, and you have other people focusing on punishing Democrats in California who don't vote for it, even though the bill itself is flawed. And at the moment has been tabled and isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So you can make it difficult to the point of the person who's saying bipartisan fixes won't come easy. My point is you have to let go of single payer for the moment to fix the ACA first. You just have to. You don't have to like it. It's not smart. It's not a winning tactic to say I'm holding out for single payer. I'm not doing anything else. Let everything else collapse and burn around me. I don't care.
That's problematic, to say the very least.
Never works that way.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and it's also. I mean, I keep coming back. I'm mentally being brought back to the story of Bernie Sanders critiquing his own role in critiquing the Clinton administration health care reform proposal. And, I mean, do you remember that story? You know which one I'm talking about, where he is talking to Bill Clinton afterwards, and he's apologizing to Bill Clinton, for being too supportive of his reform proposals and Hillary Clinton's reform proposals. And, apologizing to him and saying, and Bill Clinton is saying, what are you talking about, Bernie? You were there for me every step of the way. You were supportive of everything. And Sanders says, I now realize I should have been out there bashing it as totally inadequate in order to make political room for your compromise to sneak through as moderation. And I keep coming back to that, and the fact that Bernie Sanders is the one that formulates it, and of course his supporters now involved in a similar fight. And it's interesting because but
you didn't clue them in as to what he was doing, and so they don't get it.
I mean, he made it plain, and they just and it's also sometimes difficult to tell. You say with some players. I mean, it may not be the case here with CNA, but I mean, I could certainly see it being the case, talking to somebody about it and saying, well, don't you remember the way Bernie Sanders put it? And the answer could be, well, yeah, I'm playing my part in this, which is I have to look like a single payer or nothing advocate in order to make space for people who are single payer, but I'll play the game advocates. And oh, I see. Except nobody has thus far indicated that that's what they're doing, but I guess they could come, but maybe not for CNA. I don't know.
So maybe a decade ago, Chicago, Netroots Nation, Yearly Coast, that was the year that...
the last Yearly Coast.
Yeah, that was the year that we had the big debate with Obama and Clinton there.
Yes. As
they were running for president. And I was on a panel that was convened, one of the several panels I was on that year in an entirely too large McCormick Center, running from one end to the other to make sure that you could get, you had 3 minutes between panels.
Yes.
But I was younger, so I could do it.
All right. Okay.
And this was a healthcare panel. And we had some very staunch advocates for single payer, and we had some industry representatives who represented the moderate coalition take this in incremental steps on the panel. I was scheduled to speak but never got to.
Oh.
Because the screaming match between we want it right now and you have to take this in steps if you really want to get anything done in Washington took up the entire hour. And that's not an exaggeration.
Not hard to believe either.
And people just left that panel in tears. I mean, you didn't feel like you accomplished or came to any kind of resolution.
Yes.
And there's times I understand the idea of staking out a position so that you can therefore moderate and grudgingly, give things back.
Right.
But that means that you have to moderate and grudgingly give things back. And if you're not prepared to do that ever, then it's not a very good negotiating position. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, it's an issue you always have to wrestle with, where you're on the one hand, here we are with family, so to speak. We should actually be speaking tactically and talking about strategies and map out exactly what we're doing. And then there's the other side that feels like, well, yeah, exactly. We're here speaking with family. We have to be as forceful and open about what we want to do as possible and get everybody on our page. What better opportunity have we got to one, find allies, and then on the other hand, club people into becoming allies.
We want allies, and the best way to get allies is to understand that our page is the only page and we're right and you're wrong.
Right, well, yeah, there are some who approach it that way.
And it doesn't always work. I'm just saying.
You need a whole toolkit.
You do. And there's all sorts of people across the spectrum, and then in this particular case, especially because you have Republicans in Congress who are in the majority in both houses, you have to work with them.
You have to acknowledge that they're there.
You do. Look, I mean, if you want to pass anything, you have to work with them.
All right. Well, since they control process at this point, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to like it, but if you don't work with them, you ain't getting your bill even up there on the floor for discussion.
Right. I mean, that is something you have to remind people of from time to time.
Why didn't the House minority stop this thing?
Or why don't you just propose this? I proposed it all day long. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
I propose it, and then they say, that's a great proposal. Go find somewhere.
I blame Nancy Pelosi because the House passed this AHCA. Why didn't they stop it? Because it's the House and they don't have the votes.
Question, but yeah. People, I mean, I don't know. At that point, you have to. That's just remedial education, but it needs to be done. Even with people who are otherwise up to speed and smart on what they're doing.
Yeah, sometimes we forget that. Anyway, so that's the healthcare part of it. There's a lot to come, but the expectation is we see the language today. And then we get a sense from comments afterwards as to where this is going. And my guess is that the motion to proceed comes next week, except that they decide they don't have the votes, and then they may delay it.
Yeah. Well, they could. Or they may say, the hell with it. We lost the motion to proceed. I don't know.
That would be interesting. All right, rare. Russia. What's going on in Russia here with Trump and Russians? You know what? It's not Trump. Let me give you some pieces here.
All right.
First of all, this is the Daily Beast, and the heading is called Above the Law. Department of Justice defies court order to release Jeff Sessions' Russian contacts.
What better department?
Yeah, defying a federal court order, the U.S. DOJ has thus far failed to release part of a security clearance form disclosing AG Jeff Sessions.
That's Attorney General.
Sessions. Is he addressed as General Sessions?
Some people do say that. I do not understand that, and I object to it. He's the Attorney General. I don't think General's not the title. It's the kind of attorney he is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, but I have heard people say that and in hearings, and they love referring to him as General Sessions, mostly because I think they like to say General something, and he wants to hear his name as General Sessions.
Yeah. But me personally, I always address this.
It's Mr. Attorney General.
I always address the Surgeon General as Doctor.
Well, that's helpful. That's usually the case. Yeah, but
I never said General.
Attorney. I've seen that, and that one is even more confusing for people because they're very often in the uniformed services while serving.
Right. Well, they've got the public health service thingy there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess they're always in uniform because of the nature of the position. Even if you start as a civilian, I think you assume that rank, but not general, but.
It's always interesting. I mean, when you go to CDC, you have the people who are part of the uniformed health service, public health service. And then you have civilians who are working at CDC side by side. And so when you're talking to somebody, there's the guy in uniform and there's the guy not in uniform, but, equal rank, sometimes, one over the other, and it's incredibly confusing.
But the Attorney General, if you're looking for what to call him in a hearing, it's not General Sessions, it's Mr. Attorney General.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, the deadline, which passed Wednesday, was ordered in response to an ethics watchdog organization's Freedom of Information Act. The documents would be released, said the Justice Department. They just haven't been.
They would be if they
would be released by the deadline, except for the fact that they haven't been released by the deadline. Deadlines
do get ignored a lot, and depending on who you are, courts are more or less lenient with it. This one they'll let slide because the questions wrapped up in who makes the Department of Justice comply with it, who makes the executive branch comply with a judicial branch ruling is constitutionally thorny. But okay, so what it basically means is he can ignore that for a while. And I'm sure they will eventually release something.
Well, we'll just make sure that it's in the public interest and the public sphere that they're doing that. Now, I think that the whole thrust, if you will, of what's been happening with the Russia probe in the last 24 hours, or at least the big story about Don Jr. and all that. The Don Jr. part of it is more or less played out. That is to say, what's happened has happened, and now it's just a question of everybody having their opinion about it. But
I guess
the way that it's moving now. To give you some examples, this is Vanity Fair. Can Jared Kushner outrun the Russia nightmare? Trump's son-in-law is facing a fresh wave of scrutiny over the Trump campaign's data operation.
So fresh.
Remember that story we talked about yesterday about the Democratic Florida stuff coming out? That was from December 2016 in the New York Times. Well, now there's this McClatchy story. Trump-Russia investigators probe Jared Kushner-run digital operation.
Yes.
Investigators at the House and Senate Intelligence Committee and the Justice Department are examining whether the Trump campaign's digital operation, overseen by Jared Kushner, helped guide Russia's sophisticated voter targeting and fake news attacks on Hillary Clinton in 2016.
It did.
Well, if you're looking at collusion, that's like a big piece of it.
Yes. And
Congressional and Justice Department investigators are focusing on whether Trump's campaign pointed Russian cyber operatives to certain voting jurisdictions in key states, areas where Trump's digital team and Republican operatives were spotting unexpected weaknesses in voter support for Clinton, according to several people familiar with the parallel inquiries. Also under scrutiny is the question of whether Trump associates or campaign aides had any role in assisting the Russians in publicly releasing thousands of emails hacked from the accounts of top Democrats at turning points in the presidential race, mainly through WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
So, sure, there's the WikiLeaks thing that we all know about on the one hand, but there's this under the radar. How did the Russians get so smart that they knew exactly how to use Facebook to get messages out to particular people in Michigan?
Yes. And the answer?
And the answer is they probably had to have Americans helping them.
Or British people.
Or somebody here who would know. Cambridge
Analytica. But yes, Brad Parscale, Cambridge Analytica, and a few other players. Yeah, that's the suspicion. And, between that and the story that you read yesterday about the examples of it being used in the primaries in Florida and the nearly simultaneous with the Don Jr. meeting with the Russians, the recording of the Republican leadership basically outlining how much they know about the international program of Russian interference in democratic elections abroad, and then saying, now that we're all on the same page and recognize what a horrible danger this is, let us all swear ourselves to secrecy about it while we enjoy the fruits of it in Florida and elsewhere. The collusion goes well beyond just the people who were stupid and sat down with Russians.
So this Vanity Fair piece, in a White House defined by inexplicable ties to Russia, Jared Kushner has always had an explanation at the ready. His encounters with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, which he failed to disclose on his security clearance forms, were apparently not particularly memorable. He didn't think there was any need.
Yes.
Ditto his sit-down with Sergei Gorkov, head of a Russian bank that is currently the subject of U.S. sanctions. Business as usual.
Right.
But as Donald Trump's legal troubles deepen and the Russia investigation spirals closer to home, West Wing staffers are beginning to worry about Kushner. On Tuesday, the New York Times revealed that Trump Jr. had held a meeting last summer with a Kremlin-connected Russian lawyer, ostensibly in hopes of obtaining what was promised to be official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton. And I guess the story from last night is if you read the emails carefully, it makes it sound like Don Jr. had discussed some of this by phone before coming to the meeting. One can glean that impression.
Yes.
Having specifically said so. And therefore, this wasn't the naive, gee, I didn't know what we were going to meet when we got there. And therefore, he's lying about his lying even after he was lying.
Yes. Well, just like Kushner is revising the revisions of his
Yeah, pretty much. The email chain between Trump Jr. and an intermediary working on behalf of a Russian client stated explicitly, this is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but it's part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump.
Yes.
And then Kushner and Manafort are part of that.
Right.
When Trump Jr. has come under fire for eagerly accepting the meeting, the president's son no longer works for his father. Kushner, on the other hand, is now in the White House. As Axios' Mike Allen noted, no one has spent more time with Trump throughout the past year and has seen or knows more. In a statement, it's because he's really the president. In a statement, Kushner's attorney reiterated that he had more than 100 calls and meetings with representatives of multiple countries, and he submitted additional federal disclosure updates, including one documenting this meeting with a Russian person who he briefly attended at the request of his brother-in-law, Donald Trump Jr.
Yes. Now, I understand he claims to have forgotten and now has updated over 100 meetings with foreign nationals. I don't know what countries they're all from, but I was trying to sort of think about, and we'll do this later perhaps on Twitter, just to visualize what does it look like when you forget over 100 meetings and revise. Just think about saying,
I'm just so busy.
I
so many
forgot.
things to do. I can't remember.
Literally saying that 100 times. I mean, just my speaking it on the radio should drive the point home, but I don't have time to say it 100 times.
Exactly. So then they mention the McClatchy article, and then they say the question that both congressional and DOJ investigators have to answer is how the Russian government managed so effectively to identify and target unexpectedly influential voter populations in key states down to the precinct level. According to McClatchy, one source said the investigators wonder whether Russia would have known where to specifically target without assistance from another party. There appears to have been significant cooperation. They say cooperation because that's the legal word, right? Collusion isn't a legal term. Collusion is a political term. Cooperation between Russia's, I learned this from reading these articles about whether or not Donald Trump Jr. did or did not break the law.
I see.
So cooperation is a key word here. Between Russia's online, I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on the internet, but I do know how to read. There appears to have been significant cooperation between Russia's online propaganda machine and individuals in the United States who are knowledgeable about where to target the disinformation. Mike Carpenter, who left a senior post in the Pentagon in January, said, and by the way, Armando, who's a real lawyer and actually knows this stuff, always welcome to come in and correct me here. With an army of bots wielding pro-Trump messaging and fake news stories about Clinton, the Russian government targeted a number of key precincts in states that Clinton narrowly lost last year. It appears that, for example, women and African Americans were targeted in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, where the Democrats are too brain dead to realize these states were even in play. Mark Warner, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said, I add helpfully, during an interview with Pod Save America, which I think is the, I
don't know whose podcast it is, I forget, but it's a very popular
that's John
one.
Favreau, I want to say, and
I think that's about
some ex-Obama people,
right,
on that one. I get the fact that Russia Intel Service could figure out how to manipulate and use the bots, whether they could know how to target states and levels of voters that the Democrats weren't even aware of, really raises some questions. This is where Kushner appears to have come under scrutiny. In Forbes, just weeks after the election, how Jared Kushner won Trump the White House, the president's son-in-law boasted about how the campaign worked with data company Cambridge Analytica to micro-target voting populations. Now investigate, and don't forget, that's a Mercer organization, Cambridge Analytica.
Mm-hmm. And
now investigators are reportedly trying to determine whether the Trump campaign under Kushner's guidance might have aided the Russian government by helping identify areas that had unexpectedly weak support for Clinton. Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, told McClatchy he wants to know if the Kremlin's influence campaign was coordinated in any way in terms of targeting or in terms of timing or in terms of any other measure with the Trump campaign if there was any exchange of information, financial support funneled to organizations that were doing this kind of work. To be clear, no evidence suggests Kushner or anybody else associated with Trump's data operation aided Russia's propaganda efforts during the 2016 campaign, which is not to say that Trump's data operation might not have received aid. So we don't know yet, but these are the questions being asked, in other words.
Right. I wondered whether they maybe just have some kind of Russian 538 guy who just makes it his hobby to be able to do this sort of thing.
It could be.
Right, we haven't considered that.
Wouldn't that be scary, a Russian David Neer?
I don't know, scary or, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that, I'm convinced that there's no possible way they could have come up with this themselves, but there's a better explanation, which is we have at the ready close allies.
People here knew and they told you.
Yeah.
So this is Nick Kristof, just to give you a flavor of what's floating out there on the opinion pages of the New York Times today. All roads now lead to Kushner, which kind of sums it up.
Yeah.
It's like a Borowitz article. You don't have to read the article, just read the headline.
Yep.
So then, what we have here, Donald Trump's emails are far more damning than anybody could have imagined by Randall Eliason, who teaches white-collar criminal law at George Washington University Law School.
They should not teach people, about it's not a how-to, right?
How to avoid it?
Oh, okay. I got you. See, I think they should stop having crime classes, but okay.
Right. Anyway, any responsible campaign lawyer or campaign manager, when faced with this type of offer of assistance from the Russian government, says this guy, would run screaming in the other direction. Hopefully he or she would also report it to the FBI. Team Trump embraced it. In the thick of the campaign, 3 of Trump's most senior and trusted advisors took the time to meet with the Russian government attorney. On Monday, I referred to prosecutors building a wall of evidence brick by brick to establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt about a possible conspiracy. With these emails, Donald Trump Jr. just delivered a wheelbarrow full of bricks to the special counsel's office.
Dope.
So again, there's a lot of different ways that one can look at this. Campaign finance law seems to be the one that is the most productive at this particular point in time. It isn't treason. Leave that one alone. Mm-hmm. But whether or not you can have coordination and cooperation. And I saw another lawyer on cable yesterday saying that there's a difference between treason, which you really don't have grounds for because we're not at war, and treachery, which is a different thing altogether.
Is that really a term, though?
I don't know.
I've never seen that as a legal charge, but who knows?
But, the bottom line is for us non-lawyers, you step back and say, this is wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you can get people to that point, sure.
Whatever it is wrong. You guys figure out what the crime was. I don't care if you get Capone for murder or whether you get him for tax evasion. But the fact is, it's what he's doing is wrong.
Yeah.
It's damaging and you really got to figure out a way to stop it. Anyway, so that's that. But the whole point of all of this really is that I have this political magazine, What is Collusion? Is it even a crime? And they talk about the details here. Again, that's for the lawyers to talk about. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't brush this under the table. It's a growing firestorm every day. And it absolutely, positively involves Kushner. He's at the center of it. Don Jr. is the appetizer and Manafort is dessert. But Kushner is the main meal.
All right. I'm willing to sit down to that and carve him up.
Okay, here's one from Shane Harris from July 12th, from the Wall Street Journal. Russian officials overheard discussing Trump associates before the campaign began. It isn't clear whether Mr. Trump's associates had any connection to his presidential aspirations, but investigators are re-examining conversations detected by U.S. intelligence agencies in the spring of 2015. So they are looking everywhere on this.
Yeah, I wonder what made them put it aside the first time. I wonder if it's just plain. That can't really be what they're saying because no one would ever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so that's basically my Russia and healthcare summary for today. Can I leave you with something completely different?
Yes.
Totally?
All right. Yes, please.
Okay, this is a wonderful article by Tressie McMillan Cottom, C-O-T-T-O-M. And I'm going to leave it at the very, very bottom of the list as I scoot off and actually try to go to work. But it's about slightly. It isn't really, it was written in November of 2013, but she reposted it online and said, a lot of people are talking about this David Brooks conversation about him bringing a working class person to a upscale deli and having the person embarrassed because they didn't recognize all the different kinds of sandwich meat.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And the point of all of that is that these social cues can matter.
Yeah.
But Brooks isn't the one to explain it. No. This person, Tressie McMillan Cottom, is, and she does a wonderful job of it. And the article is entitled, Why Do Poor People, quote, waste, end quote, money on luxury goods? And it is well worth a read.
Okay.
So I leave that with you and with your readers if you don't get to it. But at the moment, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And there'll be another hour of the show. And then I will not be back on Monday next week, because next week is when I'm on vacation going to Iceland.
Oh, the big vacation. Okay.
The big vacation.
I was just thinking I need to run to Iceland instead.
I'll be gone for 10 days. I'll be back on the 28th.
I'll be right there. Okay, well that's
so you're on your own.
That's fine. We have some upcoming scheduling difficulties as it is, so well timed.
And you'll explain what it is. But in the meantime, I'm out of here.
Okay.
And I've so much enjoyed this little segment. I'll miss you for the next week and a half. But we'll catch up at some point. I'll let you know when I'm back.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Greg.
If I'm ever allowed back in the country, I don't know.
Oh, right. They may stop you at the border. Watch out for that.
Yeah, we'll have to see that. Take care and enjoy the rest of the show, folks.
Thank you. And I'll have to enjoy trying to do it, too. All right, thanks, Greg. And, have a great trip. What a fun thing. I just realized I should be running out to Iceland myself. We were planning a possible trip there, this time with the family. I went there on my own or with my brothers for his bachelor party, an extravagant, almost upscale Italian deli style bachelor party. But this time, we thought it might be fun to go with the family, and now we realize that they're restructuring the benefits program at my wife's company, and she's got a whole bunch of vacation that will go away after they restructure the benefits package, and we realized we should have made this trip this year because we have vacation time to burn for her. So, of course, bad planning on our part. What can you do? All right. Well, for those of you who might have been watching along on Twitter, I've been giving taking a stab at giving a visualization on Twitter of exactly what it would take or what it would look like for Jared Kushner to have forgotten over 100 contacts with foreign nationals. And it's rather an amazing thing. I mean, everyone, gets the sense just from saying the number of what we're talking about here. But we'll just live tweet this along as we go here. I've just been trying to, I don't know how many tweets it's even going to take to just write the phrase, oops, I forgot, over and over again. 100, I guess I'll have to get to 101 times. I'm on the 13th tweet of it right now, and we're just up to number 74 here. I think everyone gets the point, but now I feel like I've committed myself to this tactic, and we should just go ahead, and some people will put it all together as a tweet storm probably at some point. Others will advocate for my banning from Twitter. I think that's a possibility too. Here comes the 13th one. I'm up to number 79. But thinking about it, how implausible is it to forget over 100 contacts with foreign nationals? I mean, just this one contact seems implausible as it stands, especially if, as I've now seen mentioned on Twitter. I guess it was last night on the Rachel Maddow show, which as usual I missed, but it was said that Rachel Maddow was reporting that the second person in the meeting with what's her name again, Veselnitskaya, was in fact a translator. It's really interesting. Does she? And I guess yesterday I thought maybe she only just needed the comfort of a translator and not necessarily was it absolutely necessary because she was maintaining a Facebook page. But I'm not certain that her Facebook page is maintained in English. That's certainly a possibility. How you forget a meeting with a Russian national in the midst of all the Russia hysteria, by the way, but forget a meeting with a Russian national who is alleged to be connected with the government and who has to bring a translator. I mean, to have a meeting with a Russian national in Russian. I mean, he's not speaking Russian, I don't think. But I don't know. That seems pretty memorable. I doubt there were that many meetings that Kushner had during the course of the campaign that required a translator. But then again, if he's the guy who ran out, then perhaps, I don't know. Maybe he didn't see that I don't know. I'm making up excuses. Maybe he didn't see that she had been using a translator. All right. We're up to number 97 here. So, almost getting done. I think that was the 16th tweet. The 17th ought to wrap things up. 98. Oops, I forgot. 99. Oops, I forgot. 100. Oops, I forgot. 101. Oops, I forgot. And that will pretty much wrap it up. There we go. Let's see. That's tweet number 17 out of 17. Okay. So that's what it takes to run down a list of 100 or more than 100 meetings that you forgot. So, that gives you a fresh visualization of just how forgetful Jared Kushner is. But we got to have a businessman like him in the White House, because who else would have the time to forget 101 oops, I forgot meetings? Unfortunately, let's see, we have here a tweet from Chustas who says, looking forward to see where this series of tweets is going. It's not going anywhere. Disappointing, isn't it? Oh well. But that's what it looks like to forget 100 plus meetings with foreign nationals, just in case you needed any help with that one. Okay, let's see. Shall we continue on with the rest of the collection of information on Russia? Is there anything we didn't cover? Let's take a look in Pocket. If not, then we can move on and perhaps even discuss this very interesting different angle on the day's news that Greg left us with. I've got another thing, by the way, that I absolutely recommend everyone take a look at. And maybe we can go to that. Let's see. I've put aside a bunch of tweets here, and I think a lot of people, they linked to the to certain articles, but I often link to people's tweets because I think their observations on the article are perhaps even more interesting than the entirety of the article itself. Let's see. One, of course, I had just visualized for you was the tweet of Mark Berman, who is a national reporter for the Washington Post, and pointing out from today's New York Times article that Kushner, who omitted foreign contacts on security clearance forms, updated that list 3 times, adding more than 100 names. So what Times article is that exactly? It comes from the headline, "With glare on Trump children, political gets personal for president." And isn't that something? I don't think we actually hit on this particular piece in our wrap up with Greg. But this has got a lot of interesting points in it. In private, President Trump sometimes addresses his adult children as baby, a term of endearment tinged with a New Yorker's wisecracking edge. And now that Mr. Trump's babies have been swept into the vortex of his storm-tossed presidency, he is taking it personally. The fierce criticism of a meeting between Mr. Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., and a Kremlin-linked lawyer in June of 2016 has left the president, by turns, angry, defensive, and protective, but ultimately relieved that for now the worst appears to be over. Says who? People who spoke to him said Wednesday. Yes. That brings us to a couple of interesting points. First of all, one I saw mentioned this morning was, Maggie Haberman, who's on the byline of this piece, Mark Landler and Maggie Haberman, and maybe she excerpted it from this piece, but she was trying to at least get the point across that the president and the family are not, as you might expect as a Democrat and an opponent of Donald Trump, in bunker mode and panicked over what happened over the last couple of days. They seem content in the belief that they have actually turned a corner in the last couple of days. Things have gotten better. They've explained themselves. The truth is out there, and America is coming to believe it. I think they might be in for a rude awakening, but we do have to be aware of our continuing bubble problem here and be aware, at least, of the fact that it's possible that we might need to reach out and understand the rest of the country who are, in fact, both enraged about fancy elitist sandwiches and convinced that the Trumps did, as a family, turn the corner on this scandal in the last couple of days. I don't know. It also brings us, of course, back to the point of, which I think is the more salient of the first two paragraphs, the way the president takes this criticism personally because they involve his family members is actually the reason why nepotism is a bad thing and in most cases outlawed entirely, because it becomes impossible for the president to distinguish, or anyone else, to distinguish between the personal and the political, and it leads you to make bad decisions. You need to be able to handle things as policy and politics, and when it becomes personal, you can't involve yourself because you can't decide rationally. And certainly this person, Donald Trump in particular, can't decide rationally. He can't decide rationally when it doesn't involve his family. But there's also nothing that doesn't involve him in his mind, because he's got a narcissistic personality disorder, and it's impossible for him to do otherwise. So, where were we with this? For Mr. Trump, who has faced a barrage of questions about his own dealings with Russia, watching his closest family members come under harsh scrutiny for things they're accused of doing to help his presidential campaign, has marked an uncomfortable turn in the foreign entanglement that has shattered him since he took office in January, and has in fact shattered him from before that date, and according to some reports, for years. The latest disclosures also focused renewed attention on Mr. Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, who attended Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting last June with the Russian Natalia Veselnitskaya, and they came on the heels of a much criticized decision by his daughter Ivanka to sit in her father's vacated chair at a summit meeting in Germany. By the way, did Ivanka go to Paris with him this weekend? I was just wondering about that. I'm wondering what, this is an awful lot of foreign travel for him all of a sudden. I'm wondering whether he's thinking of, whether he's being urged by family members to cram in as much travel to foreign capitals as possible before he loses his grip on the presidency and has to pay for his travel himself. On Wednesday morning, Mr. Trump discarded pleas from advisors to avoid wading into the tempest over Donald Trump Jr. and posted a fusillade of tweets defending him. He denounced reports of the meeting to collect incriminating information about Hillary Clinton as part of the greatest witch hunt in political history, and even embraced the theory that his son might have been the victim in the case. He was great, Mr. Trump told people about his son's appearance on Sean Hannity's Fox News program the previous evening. By midday Wednesday, the mercurial president was telling friends and advisors that he believed the situation had improved. "I think this is getting better," he said to one group of aides hours before he was set to take off for a trip to France to mark Bastille Day. Why are we even doing that? The Trump family, friends said, always draws closer under intense pressure, and they are often under intense pressure because they're a bunch of criminals. But Mr. Trump bridles at the idea that his children, who have not spent years in the public spotlight like him, yeah, right, are now facing unrelenting scrutiny over what he believes to be a manufactured scandal by the news media. While Donald Trump Jr. has been on the firing line, the meeting with Ms. Veselnitskaya could arguably be a bigger distraction for Mr. Kushner, senior advisor to the president. He is involved in several of the administration's most sensitive foreign policy issues, from China to the Middle East peace process. His involvement in the meeting led reporters to ask the White House whether he has still held his security clearance. And again, I will reiterate, that probably for Jared Kushner in this administration doesn't really matter. I mean, it's an interesting question, but I don't think any possible answer to it gives us a really clear view of the situation. He may never have had one. You don't even know. And it doesn't make a difference for this president and this son-in-law. Another problem for nepotism. Also under scrutiny is how forthcoming Mr. Kushner was with his father-in-law about the nature of the June meeting. He met with Mr. Trump to discuss the issue, according to advisors to the White House, around the time he updated his federal disclosure form to include Ms. Veselnitskaya's name on a list of foreign contacts that Mr. Kushner was required to submit to the FBI to obtain a security clearance, if he ever did get one. Mr. Kushner supplemented the list of foreign contacts 3 times, adding more than 100 names. People close to him said, but then he probably doesn't remember any of the people close to him either. Mr. Kushner played down the significance of the meeting and omitted significant details, according to 2 people who were briefed on the exchange. Ooh, that's interesting. They said Mr. Kushner informed the president that he had met with a Russian foreign national and that while he had to report the name, it would not cause a problem for the administration. Just like firing Comey won't cause a problem. He's a brilliant tactician. We got to have a businessman like him in the White House. Another official said Mr. Kushner's assurance to the president was based on the fact that nothing came of the June meeting, which doesn't seem to matter very much, does it? In an interview with Reuters, Mr. Trump said he had not been told last summer that his son was meeting with a Russian lawyer. No, that I didn't know until a couple of days ago when I heard about this. He said, Mr. Kushner, colleagues say, has kept up a regular work schedule, gee whiz, meeting on Wednesday with Gary Cohn, the director of the National Economic Council, to discuss the administration's impending moves on trade. He's also in touch with Jason Greenblatt, Mr. Trump's Middle East envoy. There's another one. Who's in Israel for meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders, as he should be. And next week, he plans to take part in high-level economic dialogue with China, which means chocolate cake. Mr. Kushner and his wife, Ivanka, are not accompanying Mr. Trump to Paris. Thank you for answering that question. She did it in real time. She's writing this while she's listening to the show. Okay. Mr. Kushner is expected to cooperate in the next several weeks with the Senate and House Intelligence Committees that are looking into Russia's intervention in the American election and any possible collusion with the Trump campaign. He will have to devote some time to preparing for those appearances with his team of lawyers. Colleagues of Mr. Kushner said he had remained focused and remained focused and upbeat despite the drumbeat of negative headlines, a trait they ascribed to his experience dealing with the legal troubles of his father, Charles Kushner, who was convicted of tax evasion and witness tampering. Runs in the family. Sorry, guys, something in my throat there. But even as the White House labors to present a business-as-usual facade, there is evidence that Mr. Trump's family will be drawn deeper into the investigation. 2 officials familiar with the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation said the panel was now planning to expand its inquiry to include Donald Trump Jr. Gee whiz. The official said Mr. Trump's shifting reasons for the meeting and his acknowledgement that he was lured by the promise of Russian dirt on Hillary Clinton had forced the Senate panel to begin examining his role in the campaign and any contacts he may have had with Russians. The first step, officials said, would be for the Senate investigators to sit down with Mr. Trump. The Senate panel might also request that he turn over emails and financial records from any dealings with Russia, which they have done with other subjects of the investigation. And by the way, someone suggested wisely on Twitter that they ought to demand the same. I want to see those email chains in full from the others participating in that conversation too. Manafort, need all your emails. Kushner, need all your emails. Graf, Rona Graf, need all her emails as well. And for that matter, you should really be getting everybody in the campaign, including Donald Trump, but you're not going to have any luck getting those. At the same time, Mr. Kushner now looms larger in the Senate investigation. The Senate investigations concluded as early as March that his meetings during the transition with Russian ambassador and a Russian banker tied to the Kremlin warranted further scrutiny. For the president, friends said the pain of seeing his son ensnared in the Russia scandal was real. In part, that is because of all his children, he has the most complicated relationship with Donald Jr., who was a teenager when his parents divorced, and did not speak to his father for a year. That's tough. Friends who have known the Trump family for many years said they believe Donald Trump Jr. in setting up the meeting was only focused on trying to help and even impress his father with information that could help his campaign. That feels true to me. A lot of people have said, like he still hates his father and was like passive aggressively, setting him up. That's above my pay grade. I couldn't figure that one out for you. I am more inclined to believe that he was seeking approval. Anyway, the rest of the article really, and there's not that much more to it, is mostly Donald Trump complaining about this all being unfair and that they're all attacks on his family. And it doesn't add all that much to it. And with the limited time we have left, there are probably other stories that we need to hit, including by the way, riffing off of the fact that the pain is said to be, for the president, very real, of seeing his son ensnared in the scandal. Of course, the other thing that you ought to know that is very real is I am predicting that now, at this point, within the month, the infamous Russian PP tape will be validated in its entirety. I don't know whether we're ever going to see the thing, but there's been an awful lot of development, not on that front, although everybody's looking to validate the thing, I must say. That's the one part of this. I guess at that point, it's all over. It still won't drive him from office, but it would be all over for validating. There would be no part of the Steele dossier left unvalidated. Why do I say this? There's, of course, a cadre of wild speculators out there who, including, people as little trusted these days as Louise Mensch, among others. Oh, yes, by the way, breaking news I'll retweet for you here. John Aravosis tweeting a gif of Trump doing the shake and yank handshake thing on the First Lady of France. He's such a nice guy. Not only does he, I guess Macron, of course, was tipped off to it, right? So he does it to his wife. What a goddamn jackass. She ought to deck him, but I guess she can't get away with that. Anyway, just thought you might be interested in that. That's ridiculous. Anyway, where was I with this? Oh, yes, the PP tape. Yes, back to the reality. There's a couple of articles and a tweet storm. I don't know how to vet the people doing this, but I will read you at least some of I think the tweet storm was actually clearer than the article, which is a rarity. The writer here is Roger Solenberger. Does anybody know him? Anybody follow him? Anybody familiar with him? He's a writer, and it says an editor at Paste magazine, which I think we've landed on a couple of times. It doesn't strike me immediately as an outlandish source. The topic obviously is a splashy one, I guess we could say. And let me put it this way. I'm not here to tell you that this validates it, but literally there really is quite a lot that the June 2016 meeting and the Steele dossier overlap on, and that really does need to be noted. I'll just read you some of this stuff, because some of it's out there and some of it's solid. And I guess what we can really say is the parts of it that are solid, and I'll agree with them. It's not necessarily the case that you should conclude, as he does, that the P-tape is real from that, but it's not as crazy a conclusion as it once was. And isn't that the point of these sorts of excursions, really? All right, so Roger begins this way. First, he says, I just posted one completely insane thing today, and I don't know what that is, so why not another? There's now evidence that the PP tape exists. Here's proof. Okay, let's take a quick look. I'm intrigued. Tell me more. Roger, believe it or not, I'm going to actually go down this road. So today, Dr. Dina Grayson, another Twitter denizen, spouse, as it happens, of Alan Grayson, she says right up front in her Twitter bio, also former candidate for Congress. Did she also run for Congress at some point? Medical doctor and a scientist, that is MD and PhD. Very interesting. Okay. Well, Dr. Dina Grayson, Roger says, is the one who put it all together. Source D in the Steele dossier. Remember, we have some anonymous sources being cited, I think of necessity, in this spy Steele dossier. Must be, and they're identified as source A, source B, source D, et cetera, although sometimes there are names named, and it's a little bit weird how they choose to go with names sometimes, or source A, source B type labels, and other times. Okay, so here's what you got. Source D in the Steele dossier, it is concluded, must be either Emin or more likely Aras Agalarov. You remember those two, of course. This is where it's puzzling, is because elsewhere, I believe at another point in the Steele dossier, they refer to R.S. Agalarov by name, which makes it difficult to believe that he'd be source D in one place and R.S. Agalarov in another, but I could see that it's possible, but maybe source D is Amin and Aras is named in his own right. I don't know. So here's the tweet that Roger includes from Dina Grayson. Says, hashtag Steele dossier. Whoa, by the way, with fire on either side. Fire emojis. Steele dossier. Kremlin gave Trump and his team valuable intel on opponents. We know about that story. And what she's got here, she's talking, of course, about the June 2016 meeting, but she includes a screen grab with highlighting and underlining, which, of course, only makes it look crazier, from the Steele dossier. The excerpt reads, it's numbered 2 here. I don't know from what section of the dossier it comes, but it reads this way. In terms of specifics, Source A confided that the Kremlin had been feeding Trump and his team valuable intelligence on his opponents, including Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, for several years. See more below. This was confirmed by Source D, a close associate of Trump who had organized and managed his recent trips to Moscow, and who reported also in June 2016, and hint, hint, I mean, what else happened in June of 2016? Of course, the meeting. This source reported that this Russian intelligence had been very helpful to the Trump campaign, is what's implied here. The Kremlin's cultivation operation of Trump had also comprised offering him various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, especially in relation to the ongoing 2018 World Cup soccer tournament. We haven't heard much about that one yet. However, so far, for reasons unknown, Trump has not taken up any of these. Now, keep in mind, as I'm sure the tweet storm later points out, that the story we know about the Agalarovs is that, one, they arranged to have the Miss Universe contest in 2013 in Moscow. They're chiefly responsible for that. And two, that in having him there, they also pitched him on and signed a letter of intent on building a Trump Tower Moscow. Whether that never came to fruition, of course, and I don't know whether the Russian government ever intended to allow it to come to fruition. One explanation for it is that he sort of lost interest in it and withdrew from it when he became interested in running for president. But another is that it was never really going to go forward in the first place, and the Russian government was just interested in enticing him with the promise of it. I don't know. But very interesting in looking at digging up the Steele dossier again, that June 2016 would come up again, seems relevant in the context of what we're now learning about Don Jr. So, okay, let's continue on with the tweet storm here. Roger Solenberger next writing, this source was one of the people named in Donald J. Trump Jr.'s emails, Amin or Aras Agalarov. And now an excerpt from the emails, which we've all read, and just essentially here, what's underlined in the excerpt is Rob Goldstone's comment that I can also send you this info to your father via Rona Graf, his assistant, but it is ultra sensitive, so wanted to send it to you first. Remember that part. Next up in Roger Solenberger's tweet storm here is the Dr. Dina Grayson theory was just corroborated in this report from The Intercept. And it's linked here, and the link, of course, comes with the photo of Trump with the Agalarovs under the headline, Russian oligarch who plotted to aid Trump was named in private intelligence dossier. And I think I actually put that, did I put that report aside? I don't think I'm not certain that the Intercept story adds too much more than this tweet storm. But I want to get through the tweet storm itself. They may do it in a more organized fashion, but I kind of like this Solenberger story. The Agalarovs are longtime friends of the Trump family. They planned and paid for his Miss Universe excursion to Moscow in 2013. During that trip, Donald Trump made a bizarre cameo in a video starring Amin Agalarov, a pop star. Remember that one? The dossier said the PP tape, which I love. I think it's actually funnier as PP tape rather than just P tape. I don't know. You tell me. The dossier said the PP tape was recorded at the Ritz-Carlton during Trump's trip to Moscow for the Miss Universe pageant. All right. So, but of course, we know that his answer to that, Trump says, I knew that the Ritz-Carlton was bugged, and I instructed all my people to act very carefully while they were in Russia because I know everything could be recorded. And that's an awfully convincing excuse for a normal person. But for Donald Trump, it's really not. I mean, it would be just one more thing that incredibly he lied about, even though the lie makes him look a lot worse when everybody finally ends up learning the truth. But what does he care? This happens all the time. Anyway, so Sullenberger now says, here we go. The Steele dossier cites none other than Source D as one of the sources for the PP tape story. Remember that Source D first appears in the excerpts up top, saying that Source D, a close associate of Trump who would organize and manage his recent trips to Moscow, which would include, of course, the Miss Universe pageant, and we know that's an Agalarov, and who reported, although I guess there are at least three names involved with arranging the move of the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow. That would be Amin and Aras Agalarov, but also Rob Goldstone claims a lot of credit for that. Could it be that Source D is Rob Goldstone? It doesn't make a great deal of difference whether it's Goldstone or an Agalarov, in the sense that this does seem to be the Donald Trump Jr. June 2016 meeting corroborates it either way. So our first appearance in the Sweet Storm, Source D says, I helped arrange Trump's recent trip to Moscow, and that also Source D reported in June of 2016 that the Russian intelligence had been very helpful to the Trump campaign. Interesting. And also, by the way, a hint at there being some plan afoot to offer Trump various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, like Trump Tower Moscow, which did involve the Agalarovs. Okay, so our second appearance in the tweet storm of Source D comes down here. Here we go. It's Source. The dossier says in point number 3, however, there were other aspects to Trump's engagement with the Russian authorities. One which had borne fruit for them, the Steele dossier says, was to exploit Trump's personal obsessions and sexual perversion in order to obtain suitable compromising material on him. According to Source D, again, where he or she, to hide their identity, had been present, Trump's perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring, you know the story, the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated, had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia, and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform a golden showers or urination show in front of him. Yay! What a great story. Hi, kids. You listening? The hotel was known to be under FSB control, with microphones and concealed cameras in all the main rooms to record anything they wanted to. And one gets the sense that Trump indeed was aware of this. But then again, he has done dumb things like this before and said, would it surprise anybody if Donald Trump had said, I knew that they were recording. That's why it couldn't have happened. I told everybody to be careful because I know they record everything over there. And then out would come the PP tape, and we would say, I thought you said that you knew everything was being recorded. And then he would just give some dumb thing like this is, I don't know how he would explain the damn thing, but he would just say, I don't know, it's locker room, this, that, whatever dumb idea he comes up to try and explain the thing away. And we would say, but you said you did, but it doesn't matter. Words don't mean a goddamn thing to him. Yeah, I said that. I was hoping you would buy it and leave me alone, and you didn't. So big deal, you called me. Who cares? That's really all he's going to do. So, it's nonsensical, but somehow it works for him. So, okay, Roger Sullenberger then summarizes, we have source D twice, the June 2016 meeting with the Trump campaign and in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in 2013. And Junior gave us the name of someone, Aras Agalarov, that we know was factually involved with both of these things. Here's the Rob Goldstone email, which includes all of this stuff and includes the Aras Agalarov name as well. Trumps are close with the Agalarovs. Trump, the president, that is to say, sent a handwritten thank you note after his election victory. This noted in a Forbes magazine column. We've heard this part of the story before. Sullenberger continues here, but Agalarov just denied everything in the Donald J. Trump Jr., as he says, DJTJ emails, to which Jr. himself confessed. Why is that? Sullenberger continues, because this isn't 4D chess the Trumps are playing. This is connect the dots, and Agalarov did. He knows he can't be in both places. I am not really certain exactly what that tweet means, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. The only reason we can't let ourselves believe the PP tape exists, and this is important, this is a good observation, the reason we're reluctant to do it is because Trump is the president. But then again, this is Donald Trump we're talking about. Ordinarily, it's very difficult for us to break through this thing. Ordinarily, we just feel like anything that's that ludicrous, we just can't believe is actually real about the president, because what kind of an idiot you have to be. But normally, though, people who run for president have been planning this for a long time and have been living their lives in public service for some considerable amount of time, and I've been aware of the fact that they really have to watch what they're doing, because even if they don't know that they'll make it all the way to the presidency, they know they're involved in a political career, and a political career can always be hurt by something like this. Donald Trump, one, didn't really actually know he was going to come around to a political career forever, although he's been toying with it for some time. And two, thinks he's immune from everything and can buy or talk his way out of everything. There's that too. And three, he's crazy and disgusting. So sure, why not? This is Donald Trump we're talking about. It's not the president of the United States that we're really having to analyze here in a traditional sense. It is Donald Trump that we can never analyze in a traditional sense because he's a nutball. So that's where it stands, I think, with the Sullenberger thing. He goes on at this point, and then he writes it up and posts it all in Paste magazine, if you prefer article format to tweetstorm format. As for the disinformation theory, he now addresses, logically, the PP tape can't be disinformation. Why does he say so? Putin would have had to have been on to steal before June 20th of 2016. Of course, I guess it's possible, a former KGB guy, but so far nothing suggests that Putin was on to what Steele was up to before June of 2016. This means, Sullenberger continues, that he wouldn't have been aware of the counter-intel op against him. Everything after the PP tape would also have to be disinformation. The PP tape was the first entry. That means the whole dossier would be disinformation, but of course so much of it has been corroborated since then. We know it isn't, and we know Putin has killed some sources long after the fact. Why keep them close if he knew they were ratting? Here, for my article on this, he's once again pointing everyone to his Paste magazine entry in explaining especially why he thinks that it couldn't be considered disinformation, the tape. One more thing, it says, I'd like to address a lacuna I skipped over. I don't even know what that means. The only way this doesn't hold water is if source D is lying. And I guess it's possible that source D is lying, but there's an awful lot in there that makes sense now that we know about what Donald Trump Jr. was doing in June of 2016. That's not super specific, but it's an awfully specific thing for the Steele dossier to have picked out at random June of 2016, and then it turns out, months later, to have hit the nail on the head in terms of the timing of source D's report back to Russian handlers about how the intelligence they were offering the Trump campaign was being received. It's awfully, could be just fantastic luck and a lucky guess at that, but I don't know. So, we find ourselves dabbling in this nonsense once again. Okay. Let's see. Other things that need discussion. Let's see. We'll throw out on the record here. I had to save the Dan Pfeiffer tweet, which reminded us yesterday that one of the president's rage tweets from yesterday, the White House is functioning perfectly, focused on health care, tax cut and reform, and many other things. I have very little time for watching TV. You remember that one? Dan Pfeiffer observing, the best part about this tweet, of course, is that Trump heard on TV that he was watching too much TV and immediately took to Twitter to denounce that. I am not watching too much TV, no matter what you just saw on TV about me watching too much TV. I thought, we noted that yesterday and the timing of it, and it was his usual pattern. But, an additional observation that just makes it that much more special. To see on TV that you're watching too much TV and then take to Twitter to deny it. What a fun thing. Okay. Let's see. Other interesting developments that we have to catch up with. Yes, the Daily Beast reporting this one, and this I did see come up in discussion yesterday, and interesting spin on it from the Republicans in here. We've been seeing now videos and pictures of Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer from the 2016 meeting with Donald Trump Jr., turning up all over the place all of a sudden, including in a congressional hearing on the sanctions against Russia. And, of course, this is during the time that she's in the U.S. to lobby against the Magnitsky Act, but also to show up for the deposition of one of her clients in New York. Remember that weird story about that she had come to New York for this deposition and she didn't show for the deposition, which is awfully weird. And let me just say, from an intelligence point of view, losing track of a Kremlin operative inside the United States is a little troublesome. And when she doesn't show for the deposition, that's like, okay, you've got a spy on the loose at this point. What do you do about that? Anyway, so that picture's been circulating, and there was a very weird moment yesterday, and I think I've put this one aside here too, during which Michael McFaul, who was the former ambassador to Russia during the end of the Obama administration, noted that she is seen over his shoulder as he's testifying at this hearing. She's visible over his shoulder, which is kind of a weird coincidence. But apparently Republicans were running with the theory on blogs and elsewhere that, what this showed was, with the two of them in close proximity, what it means is that there was some kind of collusion between the Obama administration and Veselnitskaya and the Russians. And that, here she is she's now photographed with Obama officials. Now, he's there testifying to a congressional hearing, and she's there to monitor, and lobby against what he's testifying for. She's an interested party in this. He's the witness. They're not there together. But apparently, this is basis enough for wingnuts to try and sell the theory that it's all a setup by the Obama administration. And McFaul is tweeting at this point, once he hears this stupid idea being circulated. His answer for all this, and also, by the way, Michael Weiss, the CNN investigative reporter whose work was cited in one of the articles we read yesterday, he's saying, in response to all this, by the way, she's in D.C. to promote an anti-Magnitsky film and to troll the U.S. government, including Ambassador McFaul. She's placed in the hearing, essentially, he's supposed to recognize her, and she's playing on her phone. It'd be interesting to see whether she is posting Facebook entries or Twitter entries live from the hearing, or whether she's just taking care of email or playing solitaire for that matter. But yeah, the idea that the Republicans could spin this into evidence that Obama was in fact behind this, then the theory becomes, and this part is interesting when we read this article from the Daily Beast. The Daily Beast points out, she shouldn't have been in the country at all. She is on the watch list. It's known, if you had any questions about, well, is she really Kremlin connected? And I will say this, a lot of the evidence that we have read to date about her Kremlin connections has to be sort of surmised from circumstantial evidence. It's very difficult to discern legitimate connections to a criminal oligarchy. I mean, how do you tell whether somebody is in the government or connected with the government when they're all criminals and shouldn't be connected with any kind of legitimate government in the first place? But apparently at some point, American officialdom under the Obama administration becomes convinced of her connection because she is denied visas to enter the country at some point. And she only enters the country under a waiver of her banning for this deposition that she's supposed to be attending. And then she doesn't attend the deposition. And then she's spotted days and even weeks later wandering throughout the Northeast, from New York to Washington, D.C., all during a period when she should have been banned from the country. And you got Trump skeptics and Trump haters saying, well, what is she even doing here? She's obviously Russian intelligence connected if you're sneaking around the country doing these. She's not really sneaking. She's going to promote anti-Magnitsky films. She's showing up at congressional hearings. So I guess you couldn't exactly say she's traveling secretly around the country, but then, who's going to stop her on the street? In our country, we don't tend to do those sorts of things. We don't have people on the lookout for Russian spies everywhere. I guess now we do, but we didn't then. And Republicans were trying to claim, the reason that she was given the waiver and then the reason that the then Obama authorities looked the other way, if they did, they probably just lost track of her. But they say they deliberately looked the other way on her continued presence in the United States because they were using her to allow the Russian government to set up Donald Trump Jr. I mean, it's an awfully long walk, right? Remember, at this point, nobody in the Obama administration really believes that he's going to win anyway, and he doesn't pose any particular danger. Anyway, where were we with this? We were right at the beginning. Katie Zavadsky is a writer in the Daily Beast. Was Donald Trump Jr.'s Russian connection in the U.S. illegally? Let's just kind of check out that angle on it. Prosecutors gave Natalia Veselnitskaya permission to come to the New York City area, but it expired months before she went to Trump Tower. The State Department won't say if she got a visa either. That is weird. Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer who met Donald Trump Jr. in New York last summer, said she was denied a U.S. visa in 2015. She then asked federal prosecutors for permission to enter the U.S. to work on behalf of a client in Manhattan. Remember the Prevezon problems? Prosecutors granted Veselnitskaya temporary immigration parole in late 2015, but it expired in early 2016, not June. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York told the Daily Beast. That, of course, would have been Barara's office up until recently. Veselnitskaya's parole was not renewed, the U.S. Attorney's Office added. That raises the question of how Veselnitskaya was able to enter the U.S. in June of 2016 when she visited Trump Tower. Is there even any indication that she left from the time she entered for the deposition? I don't know. The State Department would not confirm or deny whether Veselnitskaya again applied for a visa in 2016, let alone if a visa was granted. A spokesperson told the Daily Beast the State Department could not comment due to privacy considerations. Veselnitskaya also did not respond to requests for comment, yet she visited the U.S. at least once more after she met with Trump Jr. In February of 2017, Veselnitskaya appeared in Manhattan federal court with interpreters, according to a court transcript reviewed by the Daily Beast. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley demanded to know how Veselnitskaya was able to stay in the U.S. after her parole expired on Tuesday. And ordinarily, Donald Trump would be the one demanding to know how she stayed in after her parole expired. This raises serious questions about whether the Obama administration authorized her to remain in the country, and if so, why. Grassley wrote, it raises questions as to how it happened, and one of the questions is, of course, did the Obama administration permit it to happen, and if so, why? Of course, I guess another explanation is, do they even know if Russian diplomats come and enter the country, if they fly into the country and they fly on, let's say they enter the country in general aviation, on a private aircraft, at what point do customs and immigration officials take note, if they do at all, of the entry of a private flight, private general aviation flight, and I don't know if there even is a manifest for something like that. And in other words, I'm wondering whether it's possible for her to have come back into the country under cover of, I guess, if she were arriving with a supposed diplomatic delegation, not because she was really there to conduct any diplomacy on behalf of the Russian government, but because they wanted to get her in and out of the country without having to face the immigrations and customs services. I don't know whether you can slip into the country that way or not, but it's a really interesting question. I'm just not expert enough in that. But like diplomatic mail pouches, you're not allowed to open those things up and inspect what's inside. I'm wondering whether if you come by general aviation, if you don't come on a commercial flight, whether you can do things that way or not, if you're claiming some sort of diplomatic immunity. Anyway, Veselnitskaya said in a court filing she was denied a visa to enter the U.S. in 2015. She also requested visas for her children so that they could be together with me over the Christmas holiday while I was working in New York, but this was also denied. It's unclear why her visa request was denied. In the fall of 2015, she persuaded federal prosecutors to grant her immigration parole. Despite this, she told the court she was strip searched at the airport, so I could see why you would want to avoid customs next time just for that. Alleging U.S. immigration authorities specifically targeted me on the basis of the parole number that the United States government had assigned to me. That's sort of crocodile tears on that front. I mean, no one likes to be strip searched, certainly. But the idea that she was singled out by immigration authorities specifically because the U.S. State Department had said, no, we're not letting you into the country. We think you're a spy. I don't know how much crying you're really entitled to do about that. In January of 2016, Veselnitskaya filed a declaration to extend her parole past that month. The U.S. Attorney's Office objected. And then, of course, Donald Trump eventually fired that U.S. attorney. What we've told defense counsel when they ask for it to be extended is we will reauthorize the immigration parole to allow them to attend for trial and for reasonable pretrial preparation once there is a trial date. Assistant U.S. Attorney Paul Monteleone said, according to a court transcript, Veselnitskaya's client was the owner of a Russian firm called Previzon Holdings. Previzon was accused by U.S. prosecutors of purchasing New York real estate in order to launder money stolen from Russia. Hello. Prosecutors settled with Previzon in May, and that story now the subject of renewed inquiries. Everyone wants to know why that was settled for so little money and so abruptly under the Trump administration when it had been prosecuted so aggressively under the Obama administration. Previzon was accused as a part of the $230 million fraud scheme uncovered by lawyer Sergei Magnitsky. We learned this the other day, who died in prison in Russia in 2009. The Magnitsky Act, passed in 2012, sanctioned several dozen Russian officials over Magnitsky's death and other alleged corruption. Veselnitskaya had clashed with the prosecutors before. She and three others billed the U.S. more than $50,000 in expenses. Remember this? Incurred during her client's deposition in New York. Prosecutors told Judge Thomas Grisa in a letter, including 2 nights at the expensive Plaza Hotel. The expenses that the defendants have already claimed and that the government has reimbursed pursuant to court order include 2 nights at the Plaza at $995 per night, for Veselnitskaya, who was not deposed and didn't even attend the depositions in person for the weekend after the depositions had concluded. Veselnitskaya had been staying at a cheaper hotel and then checked into the plaza after the judge ordered prosecutors to foot the bill. They added, what a troll. That's a good move, though. As part of her work in the U.S., Veselnitskaya formed a nonprofit group to lobby against the Magnitsky Act. Remember this one? The Human Rights Accountability Global Initiative Foundation. The group claims it is working to help restart American adoption of Russian children, which was suspended by President Vladimir Putin in retaliation for the Magnitsky Act. Of course, it's about sanctions. Russian adoptions and the Magnitsky Act are supposedly the main topic of discussion between Veselnitskaya and Trump. 4 days after she visited Trump Tower in New York, Veselnitskaya traveled to Washington, D.C. for a screening of an anti-Magnitsky film at the Museum. The next day, June 14th, Veselnitskaya was photographed sitting behind former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, at the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing about U.S. policy towards Putin's Russia. Attending the same hearing, lobbyist for Veselnitskaya's group, Rinat Akhmetshin, we mentioned him yesterday, and they include here a photo given to the Daily Beast by Hermitage Capital to illustrate the story. Hermitage is an investment company owned by Magnitsky's former employer. Akhmetshin was paid $10,000 by Veselnitskaya's group, according to his registered lobbyist disclosure form. Akhmetshin was described by Radio Free Europe as a hired gun for various characters from the former USSR. Grassley claims Akhmetshin is a former Russian military intelligence officer who acts as an unregistered agent for Russian interests and apparently has ties to Russian intelligence. In April of 2017, Akhmetshin met Representative Dana Rohrabacher, remember the only one besides Trump that Kevin McCarthy believed was on the Russian payroll. Akhmetshin met Rohrabacher in Berlin and reportedly approached him about the Prevezon case. Rohrabacher, a pro-Putin Republican, told CNN he is skeptical about the case and echoed Moscow talking points that it may be intended to create hostility and belligerence towards Russia. Rohrabacher is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, whose hearing Akhmetshin and Veselnitskaya attended. And interestingly enough, alongside the Michael McFaul tweet, is another claiming that, from Michael Weiss, claiming that it was, in fact, Rohrabacher who had invited the two of them to the hearing. So, that's pretty interesting too. And it's McFaul who's actually tweeting that, not Michael Weiss. I've been told that Congressman Rohrabacher invited her to the hearing. Someone should confirm with his office he is also anti-sanctions. It's a tangled web, is it not? It's a very confusing thing. But I wanted to get those data points out there so that you could process them over the next couple of days. We'll have to continue our discussion of this at some later point. Tomorrow is a travel day for me, and I have not yet been able to make significant progress in recording a new show, but I'm hopeful, crossing fingers, and maybe we can pick up some more of these points, plus some other interesting long read stuff that you should know for the weekend and going forward, and that might be of interest and might help fill in the blanks on these things. Monday, we'll be back on the air, but there'll be some renovation work going on at Kagro in the Morning World headquarters that may or may not disrupt our broadcast. I think I can set up in a quiet space elsewhere and manage a show on Monday. Next week, in its entirety, there's a lot of iffiness going on. Basketball camp is starting, and remember this, those of you who are longtime listeners will know that's the one that requires me to drop off no earlier than 8:45 across town and then race back and try and be able to run in the door and pick up the microphone at 9:01 and 30 seconds and start the show breathlessly. We do this as an annual ritual, and we mark the passage of time this way. You and I, listeners, we mature together this way. It'll be very interesting. Okay, so let's see. Anything else that we can squeeze in the next couple of minutes before handing the microphones over to the guys on the after show to bat cleanup on today's headlines? let's see. Just looking around, it's like wall-to-wall Russia in pocket these days. It's hard to even, I'm going to have to go through and organize these things, but sometimes these pre-recorded shows give me the opportunity to parse things a little more carefully, and we'll just have to depend on my ability to get that done for you tomorrow. If not, we'll take a dive into the past in our time capsule and bring back some of our previous shows, back from more innocent times before Trump turned everything on its head. All right, let's see. Let me suggest, by the way, maybe I'll save this one for weekend reading, but I'll hint to you, if you haven't seen it yet, that there is a piece from our good friend Josie Rice Duffy, who has, or Josie Duffy Rice, I'm sorry, I've got her surnames reversed there, but that is written, well, it was, for one thing, byline-wise, written before her marriage, so she's just Josie Duffy in the byline, but we know her as Josie Duffy Rice, which is a fantastic, it's not even about the usual topic for which she joined us so frequently when she was part of the Daily Kos family, but a Gawker piece that got re-upped. It's from April of 2014, and it's a fantastic story for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it reminds us, or it's a story that needs to be recalled, let's say, without giving too much about it away, every time you hear, usually right-wingers, bring up the stupid talking point whenever a criminal suspect who happens to be black finds his way into the news, which is to say every day, and people begin to complain, where are the fathers in all of this? Of course, we know it's a complete logical fallacy and a stupid one at that, because there's plenty of missing white fathers, but that's actually part of the point. We'll hint at that one, and I'll give you a link to it, and maybe we'll discuss it tomorrow, although quite honestly, it's a very interesting thing. It might be something that we need to have her back on the show to discuss, because it's a highly personal story. But I definitely want to point this story out, give you the link, give you the opportunity to read this thing. It might be like fruitless for me to read it in its entirety. It's so personal and so outside of my own personal experience, and obviously a part of hers, that either she needs to read it or whatever. But I need to be able to, you guys need to read it so that we can refer to it for shorthand every time somebody asks, where are the fathers? It's a fantastic piece. I can't recommend it highly enough. Does that intrigue you? Go for it. Get on it. Read it. But wait, don't start reading just yet, because the after show is about to come on the air, and I can tell you about all the fantastic things they have planned for this Thursday. And it being a Thursday, it means we can call it, thank God it's Giovedì. Love that Italian. Asylum seekers turned away at the border have sued the U.S. government. Interesting. With national implications, a panel of federal judges will rule on racial gerrymandering in Texas. And California's Second District Court of Appeals rules the L.A. County Sheriff's Department doesn't have to give prosecutors the names of deputies who've lied, stolen, falsified reports, and committed other types of moral misconduct, even in pending criminal cases. On the last half, they'll be reporting that a Koch brothers fuel-funded think tank, is behind Utah's anti-monument push. And more than 61 years ago, Eric Hoffer described the mind
From
of
Daily
Trump
Kos Radio
and the true believer.
On networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I should have waited to clarify that one. Eric Hoffer described the mind of the Trump true believer more than 61 years ago. I guess it's a recurring phenomenon. Stay tuned for all of that explained and more on the after show with Wink and Justice starting right now.